Hello and welcome to episode 49 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me as always are Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How you guys doing?
Great, Patrick.
And tonight we have a guest, Mark Leslie Lefebvre from KOBO. And how are you?
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Patrick.
Yeah, this is Mark's second time on the show, so it's great to have you back. I think last time was our Halloween show last year, talking about some horror. And tonight we're going to talk about KOBO's running a program called the Insiders, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of what retailers are doing to enhance the reader experience. And as always, we're going to do our roundtable first, and when we have a guest, we like to kind of start off by giving them an opportunity to talk about just sort of in general, the kinds of things that you like to read.
All right, well, I'll get started. So I just finished reading. Kevin J. Anderson and Neil Peart have a book coming out from ECW this fall, which is a sequel to Clockwork Angels, which was inspired by the Rush album. And so Clockwork Angels came out a couple years ago, and this is the Clockwork Lives. And the book that I just read was sort of a teaser for it called Clockwork Lives, The Bookseller's Tale. And so the whole premise of the book is it's kind of like a Chaucer sort of tale, like Canterbury Tales, where there's a whole bunch of linked stories associated with these booksellers. And of course, being a bookseller myself, absolutely a 5-star rating, absolutely adored it, something I really, really enjoyed. The other thing I'm reading, because I do read more than one book at a time, is I'm listening to Threshold by Sean Platt and David Wright of the Self-Publishing Podcast, and it is a really good horror novel. I'm really enjoying that. So that's what I got going on.
Awesome.
Cool. And Michael, how about you?
Yeah, I had an interesting week. I've been reading some more romance, none to really comment on, but pretty interesting stuff. And I've also been reading some books that were in the recent bundle that came out with Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush. So, Riding into the Dark, I reread that, and we've talked about that here on the show before. Absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed that. And Christine Catherine Rush has a new book out called The Right Attitude, which it gathers up a lot of her posts that she's been doing on her Business Rush blog about like attitudes and writers these days. She's been writing these posts for the last couple of weeks, so those are gathered into one book. So that's always really enjoyable. And some other really cool books on writing that I picked up. Also been listening to the Elmer Gantry audiobook. Still finishing that, and that's by Sinclair Lewis. And it can't remember the name of the narrator, but really, really cool. It's not what I expected. Not because the narrator kind of has a really the Southern drawl, and it's more. It's not how I expected to hear the characters, but I really like it. I like the pacing, and he's really theatrical without being over the top. So that's one of my favorite books. So I just have to make sure that I reread every once in a while. Otherwise, I tend to forget stuff. So that's pretty much been my weekend reading. And then I reread the first part of Nora Roberts' Born in Fire, and that was always enjoyable to do that too. So that's been my week.
Okay. And Jamie?
It's funny that Mark just mentioned the Canterbury Tales, because I've been, just with the stuff that I've been reading to my son, there's this children's author, Marcia Williams, who writes, or Marcia, I'm not sure, but M-A-R-C-I-A, and she writes these kids' versions that are like illustrated comic sort of plates. And I'd read the ones, she has one about inventors, and she had one about Shakespeare before, but we just this morning started the Canterbury Tales one that she's got. So it's like this kid version of the Canterbury Tales. So how's that for a little cool connection? We did Robin Hood and Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table last week as well. So it's been a lot of fun, different stuff. And I think Egyptian mythology before that. Main stuff I've been reading for myself. I've been continuing reading that The History of the Book in 100 Books, huge coffee table, book one, and I really got into it, and it's been really interesting. Sort of the middle stuff is now sort of into the beginnings of printing in the West and the types of stuff that was going on, but also some of the sort of censorship aspects happening early on and copyright aspects that were happening early on, because the very earliest copyright was, the Pope saying, okay, you can print all the Bibles for everybody. kind of stuff. It wasn't what we think of as copyright today. And so there were some just very interesting issues with that, and just neat seeing the types of stuff that survived, and just really fascinating book. But again, it's like a big coffee table one. I'll bring it up and show it probably when I finish it. And then the other one I've been reading is Unlundone by China Miéville. And so I'd only read, I think, one short story by China Miéville before. It was in one of those, I think, like World's Best Fantasy Annuals or something like that. That was really interesting. But I know, like, Perdido Street Station is one of the big ones big ones there that I haven't read. But this one, imagine basically Neverwhere, but as a YA version with a lot more Lewis Carroll aspects. So it's really, that's why I'm like, as I've been reading this, I'm like, oh, Michael's gonna like this one. It's really neat. Very, very short chapters, like 4-page chapters. But it's got all sorts of really neat stuff happening. It's very much like he actually thanked Neil Gaiman in the in the dedication, I guess, for encouraging him as he's been working on that project, and for what he's done towards the London Phantasmagoria. So very, very cool. And I've got some ideas for some stuff, actually. Like, I had some stuff percolating that I want to write someday that might be in that vein. So that's been a lot of fun. I'm probably a bit more than halfway done that. And I guess what I didn't finish talking about from last week, but I finished last week, like right after the show, was Green Star Season 2 by Dave Higgins and Simon Canton. And again, I enjoyed Season 1 as it's like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy toned Star Trek type story, episodic fiction, and it's really a lot of fun. A lot of sort of British humor type stuff sort of on the sidelines there as well. And so the first season was good, and I really enjoyed the characters. The second season, it's cool having those characters again, but the arc of the second season is great and really ties it together much more than the first season did, and it's got this just sort of this parallel structure going on, and it's really a lot of fun, and I think they did a great job. I liked the first one, but I love the second one, so had a lot of fun with that, and highly recommend it. So especially, again, the snarky AI sort of intros to each chapter are a blast. So yeah, that's my week of reading.
Okay. So the one book that I finished was Philip Pullman's The Subtle Knife, which is the second book in his Dark Materials trilogy. It's a bit shorter than the first book. It's one of those trilogies where the first book is 400 pages, the middle book is 300, and the last book is 500, I think, which I've started that now. So The Subtle Knife, it really suffers seriously, I think, from sequelitis, or middle book. It's the first book is fantastic. The second book is all kind of set up for the third book, it seems. New characters and all of the events. Nothing really gets resolved in the second book. There's no real ending to a particular line of any of the story. It really is just kind of leading into the third book, and it made which if you some truck going by somebody's house, which if you've got the third book sitting on the shelf is really no big deal. You can just flow right into it. But that's the kind of thing that is really frustrating as a reader when you have to wait a year or 16 months in between books. So I'm glad I've got the third one on the shelf. So I'm going to finish the third book probably this weekend, and then be able to talk about the trilogy as a whole. And then I've been reading. I have also been rereading Writing into the Dark by Dean Wesley Smith. Now that's actually no longer just a series of blog posts, but it's actually been published, and that's been great. And I just started reading Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. Have you guys heard of this book?
As recommended by James Altucher.
As recommended by James Altucher. You're right. So you've been listening to Ask Altucher too.
No, I remember it's one that stuck out as a name that
he's recommended it
years
before.
ago. Yeah,
Yeah, I've never seen this particular recommendation from him before, but he was just talking about it recently, and it struck me because I love reading the writers that my favorite authors love. So at some point in the near future, I want to read some Agatha Christie, and I'm already reading some P.G. Wodehouse because Isaac Asimov, those were two of his favorite authors. And so in this case, James was specifically saying that, he was recommending it, but he said somebody had asked him what are the best books on writing, and of course he said On Writing and the The War of Art, and things like that, Bird by Bird.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a book that he said that Chuck I don't ever know how to pronounce his last name, Palahniuk, has said that he's read this book like 300 times. And he said it's the book that the best authors have on their bookshelf. And so, of course, you hear something like that and you kind of want to check it out. So it's a series of short stories or vignettes, and I first couple last night and today, and so far it's really good.
It's a good book.
I think it's pretty short too, right?
Yeah, it's pretty short. He's a really good short story writer. He's got some other really good short stories out that I've seen in magazines that really blew me away. So, yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
It's the prose, I think, that it's the lyricism in his writing that apparently is sort of what blows people away. So I'm very curious to check that one out. So that's my week in reading. So we can move on into our topic and put the spotlight on our guest and talk about sort of the KOBO Insiders program a little bit, and just sort of in general the kinds of things that KOBO is doing to enhance the reader experience.
Yeah, this is a really exciting program. KOBO, just for those who don't know, KOBO is an anagram for book, and KOBO.com is an ebook company, sort of a Canadian version of Kindle, and we only do one thing. We focus on reading. So our actual slogan for KOBO, #ReadMore, is something that we're really, really pushing. KOBO's mandate was that anybody should be able to read anything on any device at any time. So that's why we launched initially with free apps for every platform. Pardon me.
That's
and
okay.
What we have with the KOBO Insiders program is we have taken sort of a panel of different types of readers, not just our best readers, not just the most passionate readers who consume a book or more a day, but we take a variety of readers and bring them in to get their opinion on the different apps, because we have readers, we have the e-based readers, then we have the apps, the free apps for Android, for iOS, for Mac, for PC, and different readers read in different ways. So we're really trying to get a handle on what is it, because the different teams manage those apps and provide services and support based on how the users are using them. So we're getting a feel for what it is that readers are doing, and we've always been very interested in what the readers are up to, because as an ebook company, unlike traditional print, we can tell how people are reading, and so I think when we were talking before the show, we mentioned the fact that we have the reading badges. So if you read during your lunch hour every day in your time zone, then you after you've done it 2 or 3 times, you get a badge that says lunchtime reading, or there's the happy hour if you're reading between 5 and 7. And and then there's the rush hour reads for those who are probably commuting on a train or a bus into work. Ideally, they're not driving. And burning the midnight oil and witching hour and all kinds of fun badges. And the whole idea is to remind people how fun it is to read, and showing people their stats is also something that's really, really fascinating, because I can turn my KOBO device on. And it's kind of funny. My son, of course, has a tablet with one of the KOBO tablets when we were producing them, and it's designed for readers. And I would say, well, are you almost done your book? And instead of saying, Dad, I'm halfway through, or I'm almost done, he'll go, Dad, I'm 73% of the way through, and I'll be done in 15 minutes. So he's got the stats right there in front of him. And so those are the kinds of things that sort of inspired the KOBO Insiders program, where we do get a lot of feedback, and we take the feedback. We really it goes to a bunch of different teams. It goes to the development teams that work apps. It goes to the teams that are responsible for the browse and the web store. It goes to the content team, the team that I work on, which we're the people responsible for curating and getting content into our catalog, so we can understand what should we be trying to get more of for our readers.
So is one of the things that you guys look at, I'm sure the data must be there, like the average length of a reading session so do you guys have a sense that like readers today are reading in half-hour blocks or they're reading in 5-minute blocks?
Yeah.
So you can then, I guess, with your content, you know that a book with characters is probably going to do better than one with, monster 100-page chapters.
Well, the interesting thing about when you think about those giant tomes, right, that are 1,000 pages long. I would think even one of the examples, just as e-reading was becoming the big thing, was the Steve Jobs biography, where if you're reading that on an e-reading device, you don't realize how long the book is. You just keep reading it and you keep reading it. And if it was a hardcover, you would be hurting yourself trying to carry it around. But what's interesting is we see at different times people read in different ways. So there's the lunch hour reading where they're maybe only reading for 15 minutes, or there's the reading. You can actually see that there's people on devices reading while they're waiting in line, probably at the grocery store. I mean, we don't know where they are, but you're assuming that I've got 5 minutes. I'm waiting for the bus, or I'm waiting to get picked up for my carpool. I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to pop open my phone, and that's the great thing about it being synced up in the cloud. So you could open it up on your phone, read there, so long as you're connected to a hotspot or Wi-Fi. When you pick up your device, you get home and it's at your nighttime table. When you open it up, it'll say you were reading on a different device. Do you want to sync to that spot? Which is kind of handy. So I think what we've seen is that even though there's types of readers, each type of reader still reads in different ways at different times, and that's so fascinating. When you look at trying to optimize the reading experience for readers, you realize that it has to really be different. I mean, we have 18 different fonts available, and so just understanding what are the ones that are the most popular, what are the most of the users use, and so when you're putting out the next version of the app, those are the things you consider. Is you look at that and say 73% of all of our users prefer this size, this whatever, so why don't we make that our default?
Right. So if you release a book and
those are the kind of sorry, go ahead. I missed what you're saying.
Sorry, I think we have got a bit of a lag there too.
Yeah, a little bit.
I was just gonna say, so if you release a book or a slew of books, in the fall or something, and then you find out that every single person who started reading that book, the very first thing they did was change the font size from 10 to 14. That's something you can look at kind of for your next, releases to change the default.
I think it'd be something yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, I mean the beautiful thing about ebooks and EPUBs is that it doesn't really matter what the publisher says in standard EPUB format, not in fixed layout format, but in standard EPUB format. It doesn't really matter what the publisher thinks the font should be. It's what the reader wants it to be. I want every book that I read to be large print. That's the sort of thing. And I have my own default settings on my device as well. So that's the beauty. But we do have, when you first turn it on, right, here's the default. Here's the default format that you're going to get until you tell us your new preferences.
It's funny that you're just mentioning that, because I was just I had actually a book of mine that I was getting my mother to read on her Kobo, and I was just I actually went back to her a few times at changing the font size, because she's getting into the large print stuff in some cases, and she reads a ton, and it makes big books even bigger when she gets them from the library, and I keep saying, go use your Kobo, and especially connect to your Toronto library and use your Kobo, because you can do a ton of stuff there. And like, do you like this font size? Or she's like, oh yeah, it's fine. I'm like, no, like, or do you like this font size? Or do you like this font size? Because it really makes sense. Like I think anyone who reads large print should be all over it. Like it just.
And it's so much cheaper, because I mean, those large print books are not only giant tomes, but they are expensive. In Canada, they run you 45. Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
They're
I
so
think
that's
for
one of the
kids,
challenges.
I think for kids too, one of the great features on those sort of devices is Especially when my kids were younger, like, what's this word mean? What's this word mean? It's like, well, look it up in the dictionary. Got the word right in front of you. And of course, they don't want to put the book down and go get the dictionary. And being able to just kind of hold your thumb down on the word or whatever, and up it comes, and the definition, and those features are great too.
That's a fascinating feature. That it's one of those things that you now take for granted in an e-reader. Whereas I would do that regularly when I was reading. I would go and put the book down and go grab the dictionary. And that functionality is kind of like the way kids pinch and zoom when they go to a TV set now. It's just that functionality that it's always been there, hasn't it?
It'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see how something's changed too. Like, one of the frustrating things I've had with books on some of the e-readers is people are putting, they're hyperlinking their entire table of contents, and they're left justifying it. So if you're in the table, if you want to go back a page, quite often you'll go to hit, and all of a sudden you're at some appendix at the back of the book, and then you flip back, and when you go to your next device, the furthest reading location you're at is 98% of the way through. It jumps you there, and now you got to go back.
Yeah.
Like little things like that. We're still really in the infancy of all of this, right? That people will learn eventually, hopefully, and I have seen authors do this, is to center your table of contents so that you've got white space on either side of the page, so that people can turn the page with something.
Yeah, and speaking of things like that, yeah, we've got a little bit of a lag, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those nights.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that another thing that seems like it's in its infancy is the note-taking, like being able to highlight and put notes in your ebooks. And I didn't know if you guys track that either, Mark, if you could comment on that, or any things you've observed with that feature.
Sure. We've actually taken that to author notes, and in our iOS platform, as early as 2 years ago, we actually had we could identify a user if they happened to be the author of the book, so that when they left notes, they would be tagged as the author with a little author picture, so that they could go in and leave director's commentary notes in the book. And we'd actually done a few participating time-stamped windows where we said, between this time and this time, on a long weekend, the author, if you go and leave comments in the book, the author will be alerted to the comments and will respond to your questions. So it was kind of like hosting the book club. And that was 2 years ago on the iOS platform. It was one of those chicken egg things, because they did it and thought it would be fun, but it was only on one of them, and the people who had access to it thought it was great. The authors who used it thought it was great, but it was just one of those things where there wasn't enough uptake to fully develop it. But that's one of those things that we're constantly experimenting with, in sort of A/B testing in the background, and seeing, well, if we try this and we roll it out to 50% of our users, and we compare how they play with how the other people play, and we still do a lot of that testing, because we really want to understand. You need that control too, right? You can't just go and change something and assume it's for the better and that everyone's going to enjoy it. You want to change it and then see how people react and how differently they may react to the control.
Yeah, it's interesting how different people want different things, and you want to give them those options. Like, one of the things I've noticed, I don't know if something's changed, but just when in some ebooks I read right now will say you're at location 1738 out of 9,000 or whatever, and I want a page number. And if you can't, it's nice to be able to choose those options, and you can't always. And it'll say.
But is that the page number based on what edition? What edition of the page number?
Right, it has to recalculate the page number based on your font size and all that.
No, but he's even saying, do you mean the hardcover? Do you mean the trade paperback? Do you mean the paperback? Right? Because if the book's been around long enough, it becomes meaningless, right? Like that actual, there is no one page number, whereas the percent is actually still meaningful. So I like percent. Yeah.
Your percent is good too, although it's
relative.
You mentioned what the other book you mentioned, the Steve Jobs book, but I'm reading The Stand right now, the big giant one, and it's one of it's
Giant.
I haven't often read a book on the e-reader where you read for an hour and finally the little thing goes tick up a percent. Used to that number moving a lot faster.
That's funny. One of my biggest frustrations with ebook reading is I write nonfiction books and I'm constantly referencing other books, and in my footnotes I have to reference the page I got it from, and constantly I'm buying the book on because it's 2 in the morning, I'm doing my research, and for $8.99 I can buy the ebook and have it now, do my research, start writing, and then when I go to source it, I still have to go get a print copy of the book. Thank God for Google Books, because you can at least scan for the text and go, oh, that was page 68. Okay, good. Or in some cases, like I do the research and then 2 months later I figure out what page number that really was that I got it from. So that's one of the challenges. But I think I have access to a wealth of information, and I don't have to wait for it. And yet, the way that the standard formatting is for sourcing, for identifying, attributing your sourcing in a nonfiction book, is somewhat challenging when you do your research digitally.
I wonder if you could.
That's interesting. It's also nice. You'd like to have, and this is going to be extremely difficult as devices get smaller and smaller. Is it would be nice in a situation like that too. Sometimes you want to have 2 books open in front of you at the same time, and if they were paper, you'd have them on your desk, and you can kind of almost reading 2 things at once, right? And it would do, especially if you had, say, like a tablet that was on its side, to have like a page from this book and a page from this book that you could flip each book independently, and especially for the kind of nonfiction research you're talking about, I would think.
Like I've had an ebook open on a separate screen up here while I was writing on my laptop. Had another ebook open on a tablet, and I had a print book, folded over, sort of folded over on my desk like this to hold the page, and it was like, yeah, this is we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
The browser version really helps for that too. Like that, people don't, most of us that are big-time readers don't think of using the browser version, but I was actually using the browser version today for doing a typing in. Michael know what I'm talking about, but looking at the beginning of a book, doing some typing in stuff. Actually, Mark would know what I'm talking about too on that kind of thing. And why? But it was that was fantastic. Like I was thinking about, in this particular case, like going to the library and getting that book to go, and then I'm like, but the paper is going to be such a pain, and even propping up my like the e-reader is going to be a bit of a pain, or the phone. But the browser one was fantastic. Like it was great.
Yeah, it's funny how many people actually still read. They read that way.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Sometimes
some of
PDFs.
our yeah. Well, no, please. But
I know people, and I'm like, just go the KOBO app. Come on. Like,
although I do use my tablet to read PDFs, because I get manuscripts that way from friends. When you're actually reading the galleys before the book is released, and you're like, really, you can't just send me an EPUB?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing I think will be interesting to see if these types of books can survive into the digital age as reference books, like dictionaries. And I mean, why would you need a dictionary on an e-reader? But books like grammar books, like I was referring to Brian Garner's usage dictionary. I forget the exact name of it, but it's for grammar, usage, and style, and it's organized by different categories. And it was really clunky to try to move around in a reference book like that, especially when you're looking for one specific thing. So I would be curious to see how that goes too.
And I hate when I'm reading the dictionary on my ebook and it's telling me I'm a certain % done, and I'm like, I'm never going to be done this book. Not the way I read it.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on probably about half an hour here, and I don't know, guys, but the lag seems to be getting worse since seeing the same thing.
Yeah, it's noticeable.
Yeah. Okay. So comments before we start to wrap things up?
Yeah, give me one moment.
We'll give
Check. It's kind of funny. Okay.
I think
David Anson is watching.
I think the lag, I didn't.
Oh. Yeah, David Anson's watching. He says hello, everyone.
Hey, David.
That's all we've got.
Okay, so I'll talk, and then a minute from now, Mark will hear what I said, and we'll let him talk a little bit about any final thoughts. First of all, if you have anything you want to wrap up with, and then if you'd like to tell our listeners and our viewers sort of where's the best place that they can connect with you online and find your books and say hi.
I hope the lag wasn't too long there. You know what? Search for the hashtag read more. It's one of the best things you can do for your life. You can find me at Mark Leslie. You can find KOBO at KOBO, and we're constantly putting out fun things associated with readers. And on platforms like Twitter and Facebook, we are using the Read More hashtag to celebrate the things that we all that bring us together, that bring you guys together every Tuesday. So we're really excited about those things, and I love hanging out with you guys and chatting books. It's one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah, thanks again so much for coming. And there you go. So we're going to wrap this up before the lag gets so bad that we get disconnected or anything. So to our viewers, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at tbrpodcast@gmail.com, and be sure to visit our Goodreads page. I don't know if the link is down below or not, but I think next week we are going to be talking about post-apocalyptic fiction. So full time slot Tuesday at 8 p.m. So we hope to see you there, and have a great week.
Thanks
again, Mark.
Reading, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.